Okay, friends, welcome back to another episode of Kirby Russia, the possibly strangest podcast on the internet that doesn't involve sex most of the time. So anyways, guys, I just gave a sort of speech or version at a group meeting to discuss sort of what is the Russian dream. There were some notable figures there, even one billionaire who I've met happened to show up, so... hey, pretty influential room, and I sort of already wrote on the Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore Telegram channel. I sort of wrote what the speech I gave was that I gave to them, but there's sort of more about the event. There were other people's opinions. I got a lot of feedback from people, so we're going to talk about this whole idea of the Russian dream thing from a few sort of different standpoints now. Because I think that the Russian dream, as opposed to, or in contrast to, or in complement to, possibly the American dream, is something to think about. And as someone who's been an American in the Russian media for year upon year, trust me, guys, I've had to discuss the American dream over and over and over again. But when you're forced to do something, you can also make some big revelations. So this is actually kind of a nice opportunity to talk about something I normally speak about in Russian, and I'm kind of sick of speaking about the American dream part of this. The Russian dream part is new and interesting. The American dream I've discussed very many times, but not really in English. So I think just to sort of a founding sort of idea thing, first off, we have to say that Russians really like that America has an American dream. They like that America has this sort of vision that it of what American life is like, and it's sort of like a big advertisement for America. They like that. They're definitely also jealous of it. They won't say that, but they are. So they're jealous that America has this incredible marketing sort of platform. In fact, I think I just shared today, in connection a little bit more with this upcoming live stream, that something like 42% of Americans, according to a poll, I might as well look it up, was 42% of Americans, according to whom? According to Fox News, American families increasingly believe the American dream is out of reach. So that's Fox Business. It was something in the 40s, I think. But anyways, a significant number of Americans think the American dream is over. And that's kind of one of those things where I have to explain to Russians that the idea of the American dream changes over time. And because one problem when you're a Western foreigner is that people often don't take you seriously unless you talk really, really in your face and cutthroat, okay? I think I wasted maybe the first 5 years of my career in the media by being sort of more nice and more American. I'm going to move my hands when I talk, and I'm going to be full of jokes and stuff. And you have to be actually more like... have you ever played Far Cry 3? You have to be more like the bad guy in Far Cry 3. So if any of you have played that video game, you know what I'm talking about. Very legendary figure in the world of video games, sort of a classic insane villain. But when you sort of talk like that, Russians actually listen to you. So what can I say? You got to do what works, right? So usually when I give a speech about this topic, it's a bit more harsh, and I use a little bit more harsh rhetoric. But anyways, I'm beating around the bush. The American dream, in my opinion, has sort of transformed, mutated, evolved into something different. So like when my grandparents and great-grandparents and all the other people, you know, of the pre-World War II universe, even after World War II, really like the I guess before Pax Americana started in the early 90s, essentially those people saw America as this awesome opportunity to escape certain problems of the old world. You know, a classic example I mentioned to Russians that, you know, with some exceptions, the best way to become a general in the British Empire was for your father to become a general. There was a lot of that. There was your good old-fashioned European nepotism amongst the aristocracy. And the Europeans, in a lot of places, had an aristocracy. And if you are not a member of said aristocracy, things are kind of poopy. What if you happen to be a Protestant in a country that's Catholic and really does not want the Protestants to come to power? Or vice versa. There was actually, you know, guys, people right now in Israel and Gaza and Palestine, whatever we want to refer to this region as, are killing each other right good, mostly in connection with religion. In Europe, after Martin Luther got cocky, there were a lot of people murdering each other in Europe over very nuanced positions within Christianity from a modern sort of standpoint. And America really offered a way to get the hell away from that. All those old world squabbles and fights, and you're from this village, your dad is this guy, so you can't be this. All that stuff was gone. In America, your slate was wiped clean. You were all sort of you get to start a new life. And even if your life maybe doesn't go so well, your kids get to grow up as Americans, no accent, they know what's going on, and they can have a better life. We all have to remember that there was a long time in American history where part of the American dream was that it was a little bit more oriented towards your kids would get the benefit of it. Okay, so this is your old-timey, like Ellis Island sort of American dream. The problem is that over time, maybe thanks to Hollywood or because of Hollywood or various other factors, this sort of like very more philosophical positive side of being liberal, of like stripping people of all of these religious and identity related restrictions and giving them a new start on life will allow them to rise up and be better people and all this other stuff and treat them as individuals. That sort of paradigm is a bit more philosophical. That's probably why it died. Unfortunately, we human beings, we like things dumb and blunt. And I think that idea was mutated into the idea that in America you get to have lots of stuff. The house is big, the car is big, and somehow you get to have lots of stuff and good stuff, and you're happy because of your stuff because you're in America. And that's where we went wrong. Usually because, like I said, with Russians, you have to be more crude and in your face to get the point across. I always make the example of Russians themselves, for the most part, look at America like a drunk guy at the bar sees a woman with some big tits. He sees that he's drunk, he sees that chick at the edge of the bar, and she's got some rockin' breasts, and you can already imagine he wants one thing from her, all right? And unfortunately, that's really what the rest of the world sees America as. The new American dream is the sort of drunk woman at the bar with the big boobs. They want only one thing out of it, and they certainly don't want to help her build a life, get married to her, contribute back to her life, form some sort of, family unit with her. They want their one night of fun. And unfortunately, because the American dream was mutated into stuff, it has become, America's just become something to be sort of exploited and used and taken from by foreigners. One thing that was discussed by other people within this Russian dream was the whole thing that in a lot of ways there's almost like this hierarchy of immigration. Like if you're from the absolute middle of nowhere in Russia, then you want to go to the capital city of some region. If you're from the capital city of some region, you want to go to Moscow or St. Petersburg. If you're from those cities, then you want to go to Europe. And to some extent, if you're from living then somewhere in Europe, you're going to want to go to the big major cities like London or New York. There's this weird almost global perception of how to sort of hop up some sort of pyramid that will bring you to happiness, when if we kind of look at a lot of the statistics about people and how they live, the people who tend to go up this pyramid aren't necessarily the happiest people in the world. Living in the middle of London, that would not bring me joy, or New York either. The smells, my friends, the smells of New York. So that was one thing that kind of came up here. So I just mentioned the American dream, and I didn't get too deep into that with them because, like I said, I've had to talk about this so much in Russian. But I did say to them that essentially about the Russian dream, that like with the American dream, okay? So we have the old American dream, which is, I think, the good one, which we could revive as Americans and maybe bring it back, and that'd be awesome, is like, hey, you come from the old world, you get a restart. We don't believe in all these the Protestant versus Catholic fighting. You get to start over without all that baggage, and this is awesome. And in America, we have a system for the individual, and everything's fair, and everything's awesome, and there you go. And you have plenty of opportunity. Remember the land of opportunity. You come here and you have opportunities. No guarantees, but there'll be opportunities. That sort of dream. I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. That sort of dream was both popular to both Americans and foreigners, okay? So this whole American dream thing, it wasn't like a project specifically for Europeans, right, or whoever the hell, to come move to America, Americans believed in the ideas of the American dream too. It sort of met both audiences. And to an extent, or unfortunately, the idea of America as just being this golden cow whose teat we must suck to get stuff by magical, reasons, that everything's about the stuff. In America, big house, big car, and you're happy because of it. That sort of later version of the American dream is also popular among both Americans, and it's definitely popular with the lowest low of foreign society. Like I mentioned before, as soon as I went to London, I mean, London's not in America, but it was like they scraped the absolute bottom of the barrel of every country on earth and put them in one place. It's unbelievable. But those people, the bottom of the human barrel, are the ones who want their free stuff. Okay. But anyways, in connection with that, I believe that when people, like many of you who've find my channel or other people's channels, for example, Kevin in the Crimea, you find his channel interesting, or who else? Daniel's channel, which I can't remember. Oh my God, I'm a terrible friend. I can't remember. It's American Settlers is his channel name. Brain farting, trying to find it desperately. Daniel, awful. Anyways. There's Wild Siberia. Who else? There's that Australian family who lives here. There's Father Joseph. There's a lot of people here, right, who make some interesting media content. And, I think that many of you, your what would be an appealing Russian dream to you, or what makes you interested in Russia, I think is also the same thing that Russian people want. Okay, so I think that there's a lineup. The American dream worked both for Americans and for foreigners in both of its iterations. And the Russian dream that's kind of, sort of coagulating, there's a fun word you don't get to say, except about blood. Coagulating comes up with blood, not many other substances. It's coagulating into this new idea. And I think that idea is now, or even though it's abstract, a very Russian way of doing things, is very popular to both foreign people and Russians. So I told these people numerous times, in fact, like two, I think I even mentioned it 3 times, that literally the dream is the same. There doesn't have to be some sort of like separate dream for foreigners to come here and people who are already here. This has to be sort of one thing for all. Maybe it doesn't have to be, but I think it already is, and it doesn't really need to change. And so my guess as to what people, both Russians and foreigners, find this kind of exciting or interesting about Russian, if we can put it together into some sort of dream. And remember, dreams are big ideas. Again, the old American dream of, I'm going to leave my Spanish village, and it doesn't matter who my dad is, and it doesn't matter that I'm in a Catholic country, but I'm some sort of type of Protestant, and I'm going to go, and all that's gone, and I get to restart my life, and if I work hard, then things are going to work out. I'm going to have a home and a wife and all that other good stuff, right? We have sort of that like American version, and I think then the Russian version of that, the thing that really people have sort of bit on, like of all the things that have been said. Remember, when I first came to Russia, the real slogan was stability. And boy, there were a lot of memes on the internet that were very sarcastic back in your 2006, 7, 8, 9 about Putin's stability, because the economy then was not like the economy now, and Russia then was not like Russia now. So there's a lot of sarcasm towards that, but stability was a popular phrase. Sovereignty is a phrase that Putin has used a lot. But I think the one thing that's sort of come out of Putin's mouth, and I think that much like his Western counterparts, if the people want to raise your hand, you'll be able to talk to me after I'm done with my big spiel. We will take calls today. Anyways, I think Putin, just like his Western counterparts, doesn't quite always say things off the cuff. I think when they were sitting around and they talked about stability as being one of the goals of Russian society, I think that was definitely a well thought out choice. That wasn't just something he said out of the middle of nowhere, or national sovereignty or whatever. The multipolar world comes from essentially Dugin's works. That is a well established phrase, but I think at some point someone said, hey, this idea rocks. Let's go forward with it. But anyways, I think that the ultimate sort of short expression of the Russian dream is this idea of the традиционные ценности, or as we say in English, traditional values. Those two words are very popular in Russia. They seem to be very popular among the foreign people who are fans of Russia, and it seems like those two words together combined to sort of grab the zeitgeist that we're in, and definitely can create some big pictures in your mind about what could a traditional society be like? What could it be like? Is Russia a traditional society? That kind of sounds like what I want. Why is this so exciting? Because we've seen sort of the way the West has gone, and I think for a lot of people it's too far. It's either gone too far, as in the traditional society sort of going back. Like maybe even like the West, and you're pretty cool with it, but you feel it's maybe gone too far, so let's go back. Or it could be for someone who completely rejects the West, because there was a time before the West was a thing, and they can look back to that time as being Jim Dandy and good. For a lot of people who are very frustrated by the life we have now, sometimes we can sort of paint the olden days with rosy-colored glasses, as they say in Russian, and, or I should say, you could look at things through rosy-colored glasses, and things look brighter. And I think that those two words, they're it. They're the thing that has been said that generally people all over the country, of course your Russian liberals don't like it, but they've mostly left. Besides them, it's something that I think most people think we're going to grab onto this. And I think a lot of the foreign people want to move to Russia also want to grab onto it. And if that was sort of Russia's calling card, it's a core mission statement within its Russian dream, that's probably going to work, okay? And you have to also give me a little bit of credit here, because I could have tried to come up with something to be the Russian dream, but I'm not that arrogant, and it seems like we sort of already have the idea. It's out there. It's out there. But the question is, what is it going to look like? Now, I wrote a rather lengthy article because I wanted to, because again, remember, like I said, delivering this kind of talk to Russians, you have to talk like you are some sort of in a gangster movie, okay? And I didn't want the people who are going to like rewatch the video to sort of take my words out of context. So I actually wrote in English, in very proper, nice English, what was actually saying, and that's on in the Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore Telegram, and it should be in the description of this video if you're watching this later. I am not going to read that to you. I don't mind reading an article here, but that's a long one. But long story short about the traditional values here in Russia is that everyone kind of likes this idea, but there's nothing concrete. There's nothing like specific about it. There's nothing. It's still in sort of this like idea phase, and there are many aspects of Russian life which are not traditional. Within the governmental systems, within our modern lifestyles, I said even there that in some ways it's almost like the society's kind of like an alcoholic. At some point, the alcoholic kind of wakes up and is like, you know what? Drinking is destroying my life. But there's a lot of people who have been alcoholics over the years who've, seen that. They've said that to themselves, but they keep drinking because they're used to it, or it's comfortable, or maybe they don't know how to deal with their stress and problems in some sort of other less destructive way. Essentially, you're kind of at the... Russia as a whole is kind of in this moment in history where it kind of understands that it's addicted to liberalism and the trappings of it, and then that's actually very destructive to society, but it doesn't quite know how to make changes. And in some ways, it's actually a little bit comfortable, because a lot of, again, why do people stay addicted to things? A lot of it is chemical, but things like alcohol and, say, gambling, when you touch those gambling chips, the casino chips, they don't, like, inject you with some chemical that makes you addicted to gambling. So we're kind of stuck on liberalism, and we need to sort of actually acknowledge that we're addicted to it in order to get over this addiction even further, because I don't think on a massive level we do. And then when we sort of acknowledge as a society that we're addicted to a system that's not quite working, that's where we have to go into the how are we going to change society mode. That's kind of what I was trying to say, because, you know, there are a lot of things about Russia that are not traditional, and my brain isn't working, so I'm going to try to find the article and remember the points I made. The real oh no, that was about the benefits of living in Russia. People have really been, I think, overinflating this supposed social security net we have in Russia. That Russia's bureaucratic, and bureaucracy is definitely the force of a modern era. If you ever deal with bureaucracy in any country, you will see that it is quite the anti-human force. Bureaucracy is not the way that things were done in medieval times or ancient times. It is definitely a creation of our industrial, post-industrial time. And Russia is extremely bureaucratic, and that is actually not a traditional way of doing things. Tradition is based on honor and understandings and deals and interrelations between people, and duties and obligations between said people. Not so much legal contracts. The Russian system of education, again, I mentioned that, like, our educational system in Russia and in the West and pretty much everywhere makes people start life way too late. In the olden days, you know, people were getting married much earlier. They were starting their lives more earlier, especially men learn through apprenticeships. We really, really kick the can down the road and make everyone sort of start their life as an adult at 22 when they could have started way earlier, okay? And not only that, but again, the Russian system of education, much like the Western one, and all of them sort of reward a sort of office worker, academic type of person. They don't sort of understand that there's going to be a lot of different types of people, and that the kind of people who just sort of sit and are able to memorize things and answer the teacher's questions the best aren't necessarily the people who are going to make big changes in society. So anyways, again, and I mentioned about the Russian media. You've heard me complain about this a million times, but the Russian media definitely doesn't project. There's some exceptions, and the exceptions are growing, but the Russian media does not exactly sell this image of a Russian dream of a country based on traditional values. So, because if you ever talk to a lot of Russians, especially Russian women, we're going to read some criticism from Russian women of what I had to write. They generally, whenever you talk about traditional values, they immediately jump to things like the Saudi Arabian morality police and stuff like that. They really jump down that slippery slope because, again, the perception of how things used to be in the olden days is very much interpreted by all of the wonderful liberals, especially in the Victorian era, who demonized everything before liberalism came around. So, yes. Okay. So, yeah. So, basically, that's my call, is that we really need to put together this whole traditionalist way of doing things into some sort of big, fat package. Now, before we get to calls, which will happen eventually, I wanted to talk about some of the criticisms or questions, or whatever you want to call them, that people have had for me about the sort of speech I wrote. So it looks like the very first one is from Lena. I think it is unfair about women being more valuable as mothers than legalese monkeys. I said that, do we really need more legalese reading monkeys, as in lawyers being produced by society? Because there are a lot of women with law degrees, and a lot of them don't use them. But so do men with their degrees. But anyways, she says, as much as women may wish to be a mother, she needs a husband first. In the meanwhile, what is she to do? She may as well be a lawyer as anything else while she is still single, particularly as becoming married is not a guarantee. So this is a very classical female reasoning about these sort of political issues. Well, one thing I would say is that in the olden days, again, if we're looking at traditional society, what did women do before they got married? They lived with their father. Their father was obligated to make sure that they ate, that they were taken care of, that they were protected, that they had some decent minimum, judging by the time, of course, the sort of minimal level of living standards, you know, in the 1700s was a lot different than it is today. But essentially, her father would take care of her until she would meet sort of the right guy there, and then the responsibility of taking for her and providing for her would be shifted to her husband. So again, if we were to look at things through the answer of what would a traditional society do, that would be it. Furthermore, again, it goes back to this thing where what do we really need people to do in society? What is the real benefit to society? And I'll tell you one thing, sitting at that Russian Dream meeting, the overwhelming majority of the speakers who did not like work in cahoots together before it started all mentioned the demographic crisis. We need more people. That's really what society needs. So being mom, which is something that should be considered a profession and a paid job, in my opinion, being a mother is a vastly more important than having another useless lawyer. It is important for society, and it also provides a special lot of retirement benefits to the women themselves. And it should be considered a profession. Motherhood actually takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to raise modern children. In fact, one of the reasons that like Korea and Japan are completely collapsing in terms of their population, even faster than Russia or anywhere else, is because it takes so much effort to really educate and homeschool one child that the people there just can't afford it, and they can't handle it. So it's an important job. It takes a lot of resources, and there are definitely people in the Russian government who would support me that I think that motherhood needs to be a paid profession. And also, since it was a profession, it should count towards your Social Security benefits and everything other possible benefit you'd have from being an employee. It needs to be something that is... So fundamentally, the system that we have here in Russia and a lot of countries is that you either are sort of working or you're not. And if you're not working, then motherhood is like some sort of hobby. No, that is a job. It is the most important job. And again, if you look at the statistics, children who are raised in a nice family or with especially a mother who stays home from work have much better futures on average than single moms who work all day and their kids are raised by who the hell knows at some sort of daycare center. That is just a fact. So again, that's the traditional society has a few options, and one of them would be live with your mom and dad until you're ready to move out. And it should be your father's. And also, one of the things is what happens in traditional society. If you're obligated then to live with your mom and dad, at some point when a woman gets to be, I don't know, 23, 24, 25, mom and dad are like, you got to find a guy. You got to find a guy. You got to get the hell out of here. We're getting annoyed. You've got to do something with your life. That pressure really helps people because women's options for who they can find are much better when they're younger than when they're older. Because if you do not get married when you are young, then you're going to have a lot of trouble finding a guy that's pretty decent when you're older because they're all taken. So we have a different question here or comment. Keeping women at home is not a Russian value. Who said it was? Who said it was? Where in my speech did I ever say that keeping women at home is a Russian value? If you it is a sorry, this is just too fucking. Okay, we'll continue on her quote. It's a very American notion. I feel like Americans are yet again trying to impose their vision onto others. The Russian traditional values are pretty much Soviet. No, they're fucking not. Strong educational system. Equal with max attention to all students, not the elitist BS or schools as prisons as I see in the U.S. A wide array. Soviet schools were not schools as prisons. Get the fuck out of here. What are you talking about? The entire Soviet system of education is based on rote memorization and writing whatever the teacher writes on the board and writing it in your notebook and memorizing it. It was never a system about questioning or building up philosophers. The Tsarist system of education had oratory skills and philosophy and all that other stuff. But again, that was only for a sort of chosen elite. It wasn't for your Ivan average in a village there. If we're talking about the entirety of Russian history, the Soviet Union was a very short period, and it was a period where the education system definitely beat people into a small little box that they were supposed to stay into. So I don't know what this is coming from. Anyway, so she continues on. But by variable industries, so graduates get jobs and they are needed. Yes. So the Soviet Union did give people jobs when they graduated from high school or college or whatever they did. It did guarantee them labor at a terrible salary where there's only one employer, the state. Guess what happens when you make your employer angry? Okay, so anyways, she continues on something about the equality of nationalities, races, genders, support for families, such as maternity leave, sick leave, excellent preschool education. The quality of preschool education was not good in the Soviet Union. Take a look at the photos of those shitty, prison-like daycare centers that they had in the Soviet Union. And what was the point of those daycare centers? So that way the state raises your kids so mom can go off to work. These women in the Soviet Union were told that it's the right thing to do for little children to not be raised by mom, but to be raised by state employees. And if you didn't notice something about the Soviet Union, and still to this day, it's the same way in a lot of places, especially hospitals, the state Soviet employees did not give a shit about what they were doing. Okay? Didn't give two shits, no flying fucks, not one. And these are the people who are raising the average Soviet kid. Get the F out of here. This is a ridiculous comment. I completely disagree with everything here. After school programs, children music schools and summer camps, strong retirement. Again, how does this all, again, relate to the Russian dream? So maybe you could say that the Soviet Union was, like Patriarch Kirill said, it was essentially an attempt to build a utopia by a lot of people who were Russian. Of course, the initial revolutionaries were not Russians, for the most part. But a sort of taking place on the territory of Russia. It was a attempt, he said, Patriarch Kirill said it was an attempt to build utopia, but without the whole Christ God stuff, okay? So maybe you kind of have a point that in some ways the Soviet experiment was to kind of build a Russian dream, but, you know, the whole notions of what communism was supposed to kind of look like came from somewhere else. They came from the West. So I don't know. I don't know. This is just a very, very... I'm comfortable with the way things were in the Soviet Union, so I'm going to say that we should just do that again. Even though the Soviet Union was... If you look at how much better and society is and how much better people live, the only thing you could maybe say is that in the Soviet Union, it is true that slowly but surely the entire Soviet Union grew in population slowly but surely. There was the Soviet Union, you could say one thing, is more people were born than died, okay? So the Soviets were able to do that. But do you really think that they cared about people by having the government raise your kids from 3 years old or sometimes earlier, or sticking you in a commie block apartment where everything was based on your absolute minimum needs, or worse than a commie block apartment, a communal apartment? You think a communal apartment's good for families? Anyways, if there's one thing that I do not tolerate, it is unfair nostalgia for the Soviet Union. Like, guys, I get it. There are people in the Soviet Union who worked for like 7 years at a factory and got an apartment. Cool. How was that apartment? How was that work? How was everything else? But then I want to add something, she says. It takes a village to raise the next generation that can take this world one step further in the right direction. A stay-at-home mom cannot be responsible for it. Again, who the fuck said that a traditional society has stay-at-home moms? Stay-at-home moms are a product of World War II, and she's right that it's a very American thing. That's a product of the nuclear family. There are no extended relatives. There's only mom, dad, 2.5 kids, and a dog, all in one box. The guy goes somewhere. The woman is stuck at home. Traditional societies did not live like that. Traditional societies had a lot more interaction. A lot of times the women would all be together, be it doing all the sort of work of making pelmeni or, doing all the sewing and all this stuff. I believe women were also responsible for like grinding grain. A lot of those sort of tasks. There's a British doctor of psychology. I think her name is something like Hartman or something or whatever. But anyways, she made the point that women's traditional jobs when people lived in like medieval villages were generally everything that didn't require either brute force, spending a ton of time outside, because if you look at most women's professions, they're indoors, and ones that allow for a lot of start and stop. So like you're sewing something happens with the kid, you put the sewing down, you can deal with the kid, you can come back to it. But there are also things that were always done in a group. You can sew in a group. In fact, a lot of times it's a lot more fun that way. Making pelmeni you can do in a group. So women were not stuck trapped inside of a box by themselves with the kids. That is a product of modernity that a traditional society rejects. A traditional society rejects the nuclear family because that was not the traditional family. The traditional family involved extended relatives and it involved a lot of interaction with your neighbors, kind of letting the kids outside to play so they play by themselves and the women get together and chit-chat and do whatever they're going to do. That's a lot more of it. So this shows that this person's comments really show that they don't really even know the traditional society for them, 1950s America. Okay, and that is not traditional society. So anyways, I'm going to stop raking this person over the coals. Let's read from someone else here. Why wouldn't I when it's only this? Oh, here we go. Back in the 1990s, Americans acted surprised when I shared that my grandmother was a PhD. But lots of grandmas in my world were doctors and lawyers and PhDs. I was told that I was among the first generation of women freely attending an American law school. It was a culture shock for me. I never thought growing up in Russia that women stay at home. Again, what's this? What's with the stay at home stuff? Who said that? Who said that you must be locked in a box? No one said that. I did not know a single family where it would be so. All moms had professions and jobs. Okay, to the detriment of their kids. To the detriment of their kids. You know, who's going to take the kids to do all these sports, learn all this stuff? Some people have already mentioned these like extracurricular, extra school, after school activities, check their homework and all that. Having mom be around and be accessible, or dad, or however you want to work this out, provides a lot. Because that's a real help. I don't get this. Why? Here's another thing. Why do you want, because this is, again, we're talking about, I guess, the Soviet Union. There were no, it's not like today, because this is another thing that modern technology allows. I know people, especially a lot of women, who work in sort of like the internet, marketing sphere, and it's like they can sort of do SMM and marketing and post on the internet kind of in the same way as sewing was in medieval times. They can sort of write something, post something, the kid needs them, they go to the kid. Or they can sort of, if something's happening and they need to be with the kid and take the kid somewhere, they can do it. It's kind of mobile. They can kind of go into it and bounce back. It's very flexible, and that's a real benefit of the 21st century. If you're talking about the Soviet Union and your mother is a PhD, let's just say this woman's mother is a surgeon, well, then she's going to have to put in a 10-hour shift or whatever, come home absolutely exhausted. Then essentially, rather than being a mother and someone who provided anything for her children, she's just kind of a baby factory, essentially. I don't know. I don't see where you see this. You're very trapped in this notion that man stuff is good. Working a profession is the real good thing. There's kids that you can have on the side, but being like a man, that's the way to be a woman. Fuck that. Get that shit out of here. No. Anyways, another person writes, it's true Russians absolutely value education. Yeah, but so do liberal retards in America. Education is just, for the most part, a stamp on a piece of paper that you get to prove to the government that you're allowed to do some sort of profession or to some sort of employer or something. Education relies a lot on the individual and motivating people and all that stuff. There is no such thing as just educating people. However, I think there is a point that traditional values and the encouragement of large families should mean that a woman is no less successful if she chooses a role of ultimate mother, caring for... Yes, because it's the most important thing. That's what society and Russian society needs right now, more than anything. More than all the cashiers of Pechorchka. Here's another thing for women. A lot of these professions that you see in Russia that a lot of women are doing, which is especially Pechorchka, which is a grocery store chain, all women except for the security guard because they need someone who can throw a punch. Do you really think that was worth it? Was that really worth your one and only life? Putting stuff on the shelf at Pechorchka? Sitting behind the cash register going beep, beep, beep. So you think that that's something glorious in that? Why don't you think of it the other way? Men should do the shit work. We can't have babies. We can't take care of anyone. We do all the grimy, shitty, crappy work. Why don't we think of it that way? That work is not befitting of a lady. Traditional values. Stuff that is too grimy or disgusting or pointless, that goes to us. And you could maybe be proud of that. Think of it that way. Traditional society in action. So here we go. There's a 3-year maternity leave, free milk. Oh, that's about those things that are supposedly in Russia. The free milk thing is kind of true, but you have to get it at 6 a.m. Now this is all stuff not related. Okay. Someone else writes, to identify traditional Russian values, you may want to connect with people who lived it before the onset of communist control. That would help to explain the emphasis on education. Oh, I answered this person privately, but I'll say the only people who could sort of remember what life was really like before communism were all born in 1900. There are no such people. They don't exist. We are still dealing with the stain of communism here. Unfortunately, the longer I live here, the less I like it. I try to find ways to say positive things about it, to not be a hater, but it gets worse and worse every year. Then you can discuss with people who have both international and generational experience. There is no generational experience. Everyone who's alive that I could get on the show is a product of either modern Russia or Soviet Russia. Likely most younger people in Russia have not traveled or visited abroad extensively. The ones with money sure have. Russians love to travel. If they can afford to travel, they will. So it will be difficult to draw conclusions about what to keep, to cherish, modify, blah, 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 blah. Another thing. Sorry, I need to add that I assume you all grasp that communism suppressed and penalized Christianity in Russia when they took over. Do kids there learn that in history class? Yes, they do. Do they have any insight into the culture that was there before it was destroyed? Well, children can't because they're too dumb. They're kids. I mean, that's kind of taught in schools, but it's not possible for them to understand it. That the idea of trying to put together the loss of like abstract cultural values is something that's really for the like adult brain. I'll put it that way. It was the intelligentsia was essentially destroyed. Well, that's not a good thing to say in Russia, because in Russia no one really respects the intelligentsia. In fact, Lenin even said one of his famous quotes, if I'm memory serving right, is that the intelligentsia is shit directly. Yeah, the intelligentsia is, although it's a word of sort of Russian creation, it's not exactly a positive thing. But we need to include trades as occupations. Becoming educated is a lifelong pursuit. There's something we agree on, that yes, and especially becoming educated as a lifelong pursuit means you're educating yourself. There you go. Wow. Nothing wrong with having kids when you want to. Yes, there is, because when you have kids too late, you can't have as many children, and if you have them too old, you risk geriatric pregnancy, which increases the risk of all sorts of birth defects. So there is something wrong. You have to have children when you're a younger person, from the standpoint of a woman. Don't hate on me for that. Hate on God. He's the one who made everything that way. So, okay, that was all the comments, and not surprisingly, all the sort of comments that were at least somewhat or partially negative came from women. Something to think about. Anyways, now is the time in the show where some of these women, if any of you are listening and you're angry with me, you can call in and tell me why it would be awful to live in a traditional society to my face. Tell me to go F myself, get bent, and all that. So some people, someone already wanted to speak. Hello, Anne. Were you one of the people I criticized? Because I didn't save the names.
I'm not sure if you criticized.
Okay, well, that's good.
Maybe 50%.
All right.
So I gather you're a little bit. You're struggling to find what really is Russian, right? I mean, I think I get is that people there and younger people are struggling to find like who are we and how could we be still traditional, but us. And so I do have a couple
No.
of things. Just cut me off if you want to. But anyone who has traveled or lived in different places understands it's a great surprise that you have to adapt to where you're going. You
Mm-hmm.
can't go somewhere, and even within a country that, like, let's just say United States, you can't go Dakota and say, well, I'm going to live the Southern barbecue style lifestyle here. Different cultures. I mean, different mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing about life. If you want to go live in Japan, you're not going to change Japan. You have to live like they do in Japan, or don't live there.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I really feel strongly that is true. So if Russia is trying to find its identity a little bit, um, I was very happy to hear that you said that they rejected communism. I think the West has a very hard time believing that it's still not communism. But
Yeah, one thing is, one important thing is systemically, completely. For younger people, but as you just heard from those comments, which I kind of ripped apart, that is true Soviet Union in action. It's all like if you lived here, you really talked about people in politics. You got the whole list: the free education, the free daycare, the free this, which none of it was free. Trust me, the amount of money that you make, even on a poor person's salary, has way more value than whatever you got in the Soviet Union. So that Soviet mentality of people who would prefer, they're still around, and there's a lot of them, unfortunately. But they're generally on the older half of the spectrum.
yeah. I can understand that. And some people are always complaining anyway about things, and there's always going to be people who want to be dependent. But I think it's really important for you guys to find what was the best of Russia, and you said that everybody's dead. That's the new way.
Unfortunately, yeah.
No, they're not. They're absolutely not. They're not. Let's say somebody was born just around 1920 or so, and then they had a kid, and then they have a grandchild, and if they were a Russian with the best of Russian qualities, that ain't dead. That in fact.
Well, but but hold on. But the thing is that person who was born in 1920. Okay, so when they were an adult, they lived through, I guess, then World War II. Their children would have then lived through sort of like their children would be like the baby boomers, basically. The Russian equivalent of the baby boomers, they didn't see a war. They sure heard a hell of a lot about it, but they didn't see it. And the generation after them and the generation after them didn't either. And all those people would have been raised in the Soviet education system with the Soviet values about Lenin and all this other stuff. They would have been raised in that system. And the stuff that came before, the old way of life, would be really absent from them. They would be living in apartments. They would be living in commie block apartments for the most part, and working in the Soviet system, probably in something industrial or at least something that would be more of a modern type of job, not connected to the land or any of that stuff. So these people have already many generations been completely removed from whatever the 1800s were like.
Yeah. While it's not most of the population, there are enough. Now, I have heard it said that the people who saved Russia, who allowed it to change, as you yourself
Yeah.
said, you dug out, and your leaders have said you dug out. The people who helped you dig out were the grandparents who
Mm-hmm.
remembered and who had to live under Soviet oppression, but weren't Soviet. And as you said, it was not Russians who caused that revolution at all.
Well, it's kind of one of these things where, okay, if we were to define old-timey America, a lot of old-timey America was based on hard work. That if you work hard, life will reward you. That's a very American way of looking at things. You put in the effort, you get the reward. We are now surrounded by youth, where some of them kind of believe in that, but about half of them don't. They are part of this Trotskyite globalist vision of the future. They're, the modern Americans, generation upon generation, have morphed and evolved far, far away from the hard-working Protestants of the 1800s, and the same thing has happened in Russia. Just the influences are a bit different on people, but you're not going to get some sort of pure vision of reality from grandmas and grandpas' stories, because those stories are biased. The people who are alive today can't really understand them or interpret them. And this is where we sort of get into the works of, like, when you have to actually deal with real historians who actually know. Like I mentioned that British doctor, let's see. Hold on. How am I ever going to find her? The British woman who wrote that whole big book about how women actually lived in like medieval times and all that stuff, and how it kind of wasn't that bad, and actually might be psychologically more pleasant for a lot of women today, besides to the fear of childbirth that was in the old days. So like it's essentially a game of telephone, okay, from generation upon generation. And the average person today, simply from what they've heard or whatever, is really playing a game of telephone with the past. And so they don't have an accurate opinion, just like the people who criticized what I had to say. When they're all, when they immediately jumped on, you can't keep women at home. Again, what does this keep a woman locked at home by herself is not a traditional value, but everyone thinks it is because of some 1950s fantasies. So relying on some sort of like feelings or intuition or stories that have been handed down doesn't work, because it's a game of telephone. And with every generation, the signal gets worse.
With every generation, the signal gets worse.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, humans are quite variable and extremely adaptable.
Yeah.
We are meant to be adaptable, so each generation sort of adapts to its environs. But Russia always valued education and um, education, personal education, acting like an educated person, wanting
Yeah.
to be an educated person was very important, and that's a
Oh.
good thing. And that is never going to go away.
But then why did the Soviets have to go on their crusade for literacy? Because the overwhelming majority of people throughout large periods of Russian history were either serfs, or they sort of were, just simple sort of peasants, and overwhelmingly they weren't really particularly literate or educated, and Russia survived on that for much longer than it has during this period where we have almost everyone can read.
Well, there wasn't the onset of the industrial age. It
No.
went from peasants who were very loyal to Russia. There was a divide between peasants and upper classes.
Yeah.
But there wasn't time for that middle class, so to speak, to really evolve before the communists came in and imprisoned everybody. Mentally, socially,
Yeah.
everything.
But again, you said that because you just made the point that like Russians have always valued education. Well, it's okay. So you say always. Well, based on what? Why do we know that medieval Russians, who ultimately only educated a small percentage of the population, valued education? Maybe their values were something else.
Well, okay, Tim, but let's just—it's the same thing in England. Let's just pick England.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You had a monarchy, and then you had people way below, and it was only the onset of the industrial era, which had a lot of inequalities and bad things in it, but it was allowed to progress in a more, I would say, democratic fashion than Russia was. So
Mm-hmm.
so it's just that Russia missed a big chunk of evolution and natural development. And I would imagine young people are struggling to find what that is and how to fill that gap. And that's why the best way, I think, to solve that is by example, is to have human beings who survived it, who weren't suppressed or choked, to be there, and people will catch on. People will catch
Okay.
on. But you can't read it. You can't read humanity. You have to feel it.
All right. Well, if we're talking about Russia missing things, you have to remember that before communism, when the Enlightenment happened, the overwhelming majority of people in Russia rejected it. The Enlightenment got completely rejected, and many Russian intellectuals today would say, actually, thank goodness, we should have rejected even more, including communism. So I don't think that. How can you really say that then Russia's missing something? Because if Russian history is based on this idea of missing something, and then it's missing something from the West, then essentially what you're sort of arguing is that Russia really needs to sort of again reconnect with the West, and it's somehow somewhat inferior, and something's not right, and we all lived through that in the '90s, and that didn't work either. So I don't know.
No, trust me, I do not think Russia is inferior at all. That is nowhere in my attitude. And I'm not saying that England is superior at this point. I'm just saying they missed a section of their natural evolution.
Well, yeah, well, no, but then, so the natural evolution to what? What does this piece look like? Because if the natural evolution is Western-style democracy, well, then that certainly says that one certain way of doing things is superior. Maybe that, like I said, if people claim to love Dostoevsky, he was completely against the entire Enlightenment.
Yeah, okay, but that's, philosophers will always find philosophy to get behind. But I think if you could find some Russians who grew up in the West,
Yeah.
And still, with grandparents from where you're talking about,
Uh
and you
huh.
will see that they are not, you will see that they have not completely given up what they learned from the grandparents and so forth. And there are, I'm sure, Russian Orthodox churches around the world, right?
Well, yeah, there are.
Um,
But of course, the Russian Orthodox Church itself is not is there's certain jurisdictions and all that. But so technically, I would say yes, it would seem, but kind of depends who gets to go where, what bishop controls what or whatever. But I don't know. Yeah, so I don't quite get, but I don't know. I don't think that there's anything really missing, other than we missed in Russia. We definitely missed the opportunity to pass on communism. That's that's something that maybe we could have. It would be interesting to see what would have happened, but c'est la vie, and that's the past. So I don't know.
I'll wrap it up.
Yeah,
I'll wrap it up here. I mean, you took a huge hit with communism. It was not your choice at all.
yeah.
You took a huge hit, and I think you have to be easy on yourself and understand that that was a hit, and it's going to take a while
Mm-hmm.
and to be patient. And it's there. But human nature is basically better. Uh, they're more good people than bad people because bad stuff doesn't work. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work. It doesn't work in a bad business. It doesn't, and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work in communism. So give yourself some time. But there are people around the world who escaped the debacle of communism and still maintain Russian culture in their hearts, languages, religions, and so forth. And
Mm-hmm.
it's there. You
All
just
right.
need to find it.
Well, thank you very much. All the best to you. You've called in many times. I appreciate that. And Sam Oak, who has also called in many times, wants to say something. So, Sam, we're talking about the Russian dream here. We're also talking a little bit about how people do not understand me or do not understand what a traditional society looks like. So, yeah, that's our topic for today.
Yeah, I've been reading Matthew Raphael Johnson's book called The Third Realm. It's from the you can buy it at the Barnes Review.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. It's a revisionist history of Russia. Basically, he talks about how Peter the Great was not necessarily so great. Catherine the Great was not so great.
No, and like I always tell people to point out, in Russia, it's called Peter the First, not the Great.
Yeah, it's an interesting read. I do have a couple questions. Is there fluoride in the water in Russia?
No.
And they have. Okay, what about 5G towers? Are they planning to do that?
Maybe, I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Okay, and then do they have what are they called?
There are cell phone towers. Towers exist. Your cell phone works all over the country. So there are cell phone towers in Russia. 100% yes.
But they're not. Yeah, I mean, because the 5G has.
You have to remember the whole 5G thing. Russians don't believe in that. That's not a thing here. In Russia, that whole set of reasoning doesn't exist here. The same thing with chemtrails. That doesn't exist in Russian society.
Okay, so they don't spray it, or they don't believe that it exists.
It is. Hold on, let me think about this. I'm trying to think about something. It is. How often do you discuss with your friends the Thai alphabet, the alphabet that the Thais use in Thailand?
Never.
That's the equivalent. It's something that maybe exists in some other culture. You never discuss it. You never think about it. And that's both chemtrails and the whole like 5G thing. It's not a thing here. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, because it seems like generally it's not a Malthusian society where they want people to live short lives with high disposability of the people.
Well, there's a lot of traders, and the traders get money from people who believe in that. And that's what happened to Russia very much in the 90s. It's more the Malthusian influence from abroad. Because one thing is, vile, corrupt people in Russia are dumb as shit. Well, that's the one saving grace, is that these people, all they know how to do is essentially sort of like protect their back. They're not like you're sort of let's take your archetype. We have your like George Soros or your Klaus Schwab kind of guy. They or especially Bill Gates. They believe in some sort of like dark vision, and they have the money and the resources and the know-how, and they want to put this. They want to influence the public. If someone in Russia were to like work for them, it's just about the money. They don't understand it. They don't get it. Like, I'll put it this way. If there are some plenty of paid advocates for LGBT stuff over the years, and the ones that were in the government, they don't even understand it. They just know they got a bribe and they should maybe do something, or maybe not. Like, the ineptitude level is shocking when it comes to bureaucracy. And that ineptitude saves Russia from those type of people.
Yeah. So, would you say with how the Duma has been receiving influence from the church, the Orthodox Church, do you think that Russian society will be less bureaucratic going forward, or more, or something else?
In the short term, no, because people here don't. They just like people in the West. All solutions to all problems that people can think up themselves are bureaucratic. They can't go away from that way of thinking. Like, for example, I've brought this up before. It's a little bit gross, but I've already said the F word like 50 times today. I'm kind of in a fired up mood for various different reasons. But essentially, we had a discussion on the radio about dogs that poop in the park. And everyone who called in said that there needs to be some sort of like special police division to deal with this. And every solution that came in from the callers, all of them, were all bureaucratic. Have some people like check on this to punish people. Do you know how much money that costs? Do you know how ineffective it would be? Just deal with stepping in a piece of shit from time to time. And that is the perfect example of society. Is people here, they cannot even conceive that they think that way. And Americans and people in the West and a lot of countries do it too. That is one of the diseases of modernity that I actually mentioned in my speech, that it's something we kind of have to go over, and we have to start thinking to people of like, okay, here, what kind of solutions could happen with this whole situation where, yeah, it is kind of unpleasant, especially if you have little kids and there's animal feces everywhere. One time my son was actually playing in a public sandbox and he just grabbed a turd, okay? That actually did happen. Not good. Could have been bad. He could have got a horrible infection from that. Not pleasant, right? So what do we do? Like, why then is this a government bureaucracy thing? So we could then open a more philosophical things of like, do his father have the right to hit the guy with the dog? Or is this sort of thing with like the dogs, like it's just something that's really sort of uncontrollable and that's kind of going to be the way it is, and that, we should just, or do we have the right, if we see someone's dog and it poops, they don't do anything about it, do I have the right to really rail on this person or take photographs of them and humiliate them online maybe? Is that the way? How do we deal with this? Or is it just a matter that people don't understand it? They don't think about it. Because I can tell you one thing, driving in Russia changed real quick. Like the absolute chaos of the 90s driving, people kind of found their rhythm over time. Like Russians really changed their attitude and are a lot more let's say, keep themselves in line more so than they used to. Is it a question of then I don't know, fines? But again, do we need to have the police get into that? That's another form of bureaucracy. We don't know. But no one who called in, no one, they couldn't even comprehend what I was talking about, which in the morning in Russian, maybe I was badly expressing myself, to be fair, but they just could not get that the solution to that problem could be non-bureaucratic, or that maybe no solution is required. Maybe we could just do nothing, and who cares?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're talking about the principle of you can't legislate morality, but if you, like in the West, we have an anti-Christian and anti-moral society.
No.
So what fills in that gap is, basically a nanny state and all this stuff. But in Russia, they're getting closer to the source, which is increasing the morality.
But remember, the Constitution isn't getting that much closer to the source. We still have a Western-style Constitution where we have separation of powers, and we have the legislative branch as a giant room of people. Who the hell knows who they are sometimes, who all have to get together and vote on things that they don't understand, that they haven't read. And then the executive branch is maybe forced to actually sort of deal with it, but then in a lot of ways they don't because they're Russians, and so on and so forth. So the system itself is Western, and it is bureaucratic. There's no escaping that.
Are you familiar with a character named Stroganov from Russian history? I guess, according to Matthew Raphael Johnson, he was basically a...
No, but that's a kind of generic last name. But anyways.
Yeah. He's got an interesting take. He wrote this book in the early 2000s, and it was very forward-looking. He was talking about the Anglo-American establishment then, and I guess Lithuania and Lviv were jump-off points for the Teutonic and Livonian Knights, and they kept back then attacking Russia.
And that's this way to this day. That's why the West really wanted the Baltic states to become part of NATO, which they did, is because they were a nice jumping off point. Because they're definitely torn. However, at that very meeting where I discussed the Russian dream, we had a guy come from the Baltics, and he said that that house of cards is really fragile. In his opinion, talking to a lot of people, just saying the police, the military, and I quote. The people in the Baltic countries are waiting to be reconquered finally. To have these Euro clowns with their homosexuality and their rainbow flags and their deindustrialization and destruction of the local populations to just go back into a sane society. They're waiting just to be... I'll put it this way. When and if tanks were to roll over the border, they'd all just applaud. That's what's really his perspective, because things are really bad in the Baltics because of like this whole European, because remember, like with Ukraine and like Moldova and the Caucasus republics, like, Georgia and all that, they're kind of still stuck in the fantasy of like, oh my God, Europe has so much money and it's so pretty and it's so amazing. Oh my God, let's give up our national sovereignty so we can have nice things and be rich somehow through magical reasons. They're well, probably in Ukraine. After losing so many lives, unfortunately, things may not be so clear anymore. But I'll put it this way, that propaganda reasoning lasted a lot longer there than it did in the Baltics, because the Baltics have been essentially part of this whole European shenanigans for a much longer amount of time. And I think a lot of people started to wake up to the fact after, 30 years have gone by, that it's like, I don't think we're poor and rapidly depopulating because of the Russians. You see what I mean? And in fact, kind of the opposite. So, yeah.
So what do you think it's going to take for the system to really collapse? Because obviously the fractional reserve banking and the fiat currency is making people chase the money and play to the piper's tune.
Oh, dude, if you're good, do you mean like on a global scale, or the United States? What economy? Whose economy? Where?
Okay, let's start with the SWIFT-based economy. What's it going to take for the SWIFT?
Oh, dude, you're talking to the wrong person. I'm not a financial expert. I really can't tell you how integral SWIFT would be. I could only guess that, as long as some countries use it, it'll still have some value. But of course, the more countries that get excluded from it, it reduces the threat of excluding people further. You know what I mean? It's kind of like we have this club we all have to be a part of to have money. And like Russia and Iran have been excluded from that. But then every other major player that gets excluded from the club makes it easier for others to not feel threatened anymore by exclusion, because the amount of people who are in the other club keeps growing. So that's really all I can say about that from a strategic standpoint. About how the SWIFT system is going to look in like 20 or 30 years, dude, you have to talk to a financial guy. I am not qualified to answer that question.
Yeah, but I think just the fact there's competition is going to limit what's going to happen, because I don't think I don't think the Western neoliberal order could pull off another COVID at this point. They're basically on the fritz financially.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's not a lot more room to drop. The whole Ukraine thing was a big, bad, terrible investment.
Well, we don't know. Like I just posted that it's the Ukrainian economy came up 42 billion, 48 billion, something in the 40 billions of dollars, not hryvnias, dollars, which is important because they're a lot bigger, of dollars, of budget deficit. And if Washington can't pump that money into the system, well, remember, Ukraine, $48 billion in governmental terms doesn't seem like that much money. But in a country that's sort of in a war, in a desperate situation, has lost a lot of its population for various factors, that's a lot. That's a lot of government employees' salaries and all that, and that actually could, if they don't get refunded, could lead to the systemic collapse. That's what I think why Larry Johnson came out and said that the war is probably going to end in February. Again, the former CIA people who get information from current CIA people who have interestingly become a lot more bold with their opinions after the start of the Ukraine war, which is kind of interesting. They all seem to pretty much unanimously think that this thing is really winding down. So maybe with the Ukrainian economy, it's a little bit easier to for a non-expert in economics to just look at the raw fact that at some point, no hospitals, no schools, nothing is going to be able to be done. The United States is more magical and mystical because it's farther away. It's not involved in the middle of a war. We fund a lot of things that maybe we could choose not to fund. Another thing, as my father always says, we may owe a lot of national debt, but who's going to make us pay it? And that's another thing about the United States, is the United States is definitely a different bird, a different creature from Ukraine, even if there are a lot of problems in America. Maybe America could actually default and sort of get through all this. Who knows? But then again, the United States hasn't lost a significant, let's see, if Ukraine used to have Ukraine was down to about 40 million people when the Maidan happened. And so they've already lost like maybe, I don't know, approaching like 2% of the population and just killed alone, maybe even more. I mean, that's like the U.S. Civil War, my friend. That's the type of casualty rate that they're suffering. The U.S. Civil War killed a lot of Americans, a lot. And I guess they are at about the U.S. Civil War casualty level, which is crazy. Remember how bad the U.S. Civil War was for the United States, but thankfully the United States is far away from everybody. The Civil War ended, and then Reconstruction and some exploitation began right after that. And the United States had the freedom, thanks to the best geopolitical position on Earth, to sort of restart. Ukraine does not have that luxury. They have an enemy army at their border that is vastly superior, with a vastly superior economy, while their economy is near collapse. So the situations are just too different, but I think between the United States and Ukraine. But anyways, Sam, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for some interesting questions. You're always full of surprises. Slav Squatch is here, and I just allowed him to speak. Or did I hit the wrong button? Slav, are you here? No, you should be able to talk. I think I hit the right button. Hello, Slav Squatch. Are you here? Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
The overall, mostly good.
Oh, right. the village?
Yeah, well, the village basically, as you'll see soon. So one person kind of, I guess I probably wrote this badly. One thing I got to be more careful is on Sunday I'm gonna get the mock-up of the site, not like the final site, but like the mock-up for it, and that's when we're gonna start filling it full of the information that is actually like the step-by-step guide, what you're gonna actually be able to buy, and especially the sort of how much is this gonna cost, what is this all gonna work with, all the pieces of the puzzle are gonna come together via the site, and then. When the site gets finally uploaded, that's essentially the moment when people can begin to buy their piece of the Russian dream. However, the Russian dream has expanded as we've gotten some interesting offers from a lot of different people. So that's where we're at. Just trying to get the site done so we can get this thing going.
That sounds great.
All right. All the best, man. So thank you for calling in there, even if it was an accidental one. I don't mind an accidental call in. I don't mind that at all. Let's see. I'm going to then check the chat here. If anyone had some questions and comments, I'll read them. If someone wants to raise their hand, go nuts. Because I guess I've kind of said everything I want to say. Let's see. Hold on. I should look at the chats, the messages only about the live stream because things are getting confusing. Lydia says, why Americans always think it's kind of natural to be like Americans. Natural evolution. Oh boy. It's exactly... she didn't say, oh boy, I did. Lydia continues, it's exactly what Dugin is talking about. Universalism. Yep, that's it. That's why I was trying to say that Russia didn't miss anything. Russia had a different path of evolution. So universal means you have to become something like we are. Maybe America needs healing. Well, I think America needing healing is sort of a different concept. I don't know. Kind of was one of these things like, what do you mean by healing? But considering how much the media and the government has done a good job of kind of making us all hate each other, maybe we do. Maybe it would be nice to get some healing and do the whole get rid of Black Lives Matter, bring back good old Dr. Martin Luther King. Why not bring back those nice let's all get along and be part of Team America messaging that he had to say for the most part. So, I don't know. Yeah, maybe we do need some healing. Who knows? Are there any other messages not related, not under there? Someone who was hoping to immigrate to Russia instead calling the SMO. So one of our moderators got angry at someone for calling the special military operation a war. It kind of depends. I've even noticed within Russian society themselves that at the beginning, people were more inclined to call it the special military operation and really keep that separate. But I've kind of noticed that with time, people have kind of given up. It's kind of transformed more into a war, because also the special military operation phase was kind of more the first part, maybe technically. So it kind of depends who you're asking. But I'll put it this way, the term for just calling it the war is vastly more common than in the first few months of said war. So I don't think that is that is not critical. Maybe one thing that could get you in trouble is if people just constantly posted everywhere on my social media that it's the Russian attempt to annex all of Eastern Europe or something like that. I probably won't get in trouble for something that other people post, but yeah. So, in fact, to be honest, most people in Russia don't get in trouble for anything they post. So, I don't know. There's definitely some paranoid people who think that there's the KGB is listening, and that they still exist. Anyways. No, some people are talking about how they miss Mexican food. Yeah, I kind of do too. I kind of do miss Mexican food. In a lot of ways, a lot of the treats from Uzbekistan have kind of filled in that niche of what Mexican food would be. Because like a doner kebab, is what we call shawarma or shawarma in St. Petersburg. It's basically kind of like a burrito, but more Eastern. And to be honest, the ones that are in Russia have lots of ingredients from cold weather, so they're almost like Islamo-Slavic at this point, and they're more native, and they're kind of like a burrito. So I think, unfortunately, although I've had some okay burritos from time to time, that whole niche of like having something wrapped up and it's hot and you eat it on the street has been occupied by shawarma, the great Slavic yet Islamic and maybe Turkic tradition. Okay, guys, it looks like no one wants to talk to me, which is fine. You don't have to. We're all out of messages. So, oh, no, someone does want to talk to me. Chantel might do. Chantel, were you one of the people that I raked over the coals earlier and you want revenge? If you want blood revenge, you take it. Tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me I'm a horrible person, too. Hello?
Hi, Tim.
Oh, there you are. Okay, good. I heard some kind of noise. I was like, oh no, is her microphone ruined? No. So anyway, Chantel, what do you got to say?
Well, we were listening to you a little bit earlier, and then I had to disconnect and reconnect. But I was listening to you, you know, when you were talking about moms being, you know, it's a full-time job and they should get paid. And you have no idea how many times you have actually made that statement before.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because Chantel, people think because I'm kind of a angry bearded guy who's masculine that somehow deep down I want to like repress women or something. I think that would be very, in some ways, again, about this whole like emancipation thing, that the Just Russia party, they want to pay every woman in Russia who has kids, from what I understand, if my memory could be wrong on this one, so if like a year ago I said something slightly different, don't kill me, but I kind of remember them saying that basically woman has your kid, she's now a professional mom and she gets 90,000 rubles a month, which is kind of like a pretty decent salary. Well, in my opinion, it's not a decent salary. Based on Russian realities, it's a pretty decent salary. And it would definitely help out. And if the government wants people to have kids, okay, again, carrots and sticks, well, then pay them in a direct, blunt, simple way. And I think motherhood should be a profession, and I support that initiative by the Just Russia Party, and I hope it succeeds. And women get, this is going to sound, women get what they deserve, but in a good way.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I read something somewhere, and again, yeah, don't quote me either.
Yeah.
I think I read something about, after the third child, after the number 3, they start to get paid, but...
No. That's only with the, you get this sort of thing. And again, this is one thing where it's easy to just sort of write that the Russians pay people to have kids. Kind of. It is this very complicated amount, the big, like sort of lump sum of money that can be used for certain things. The main thing that people use it for is to pay off a mortgage, not buy a house or an apartment or whatever, but to pay it off. So it's not as great as it might sound, because you sort of have to, on your own, get this whole mortgage going and then annul a huge chunk of it with that government payment. So it kind of works, but it's very complicated, and it also, it's very hard to get rid of that apartment later if you wanted to sell it or do something with it. So it comes with a lot of restrictions, whereas I think it would be just better write the check. You know,
Is that...
No. Mm-hmm.
Is this only for people who are native to Russia, or does it matter if you're a foreigner who's arrived in Russia?
I'm not sure, but it definitely only applies to citizens. Like government benefits, there are, again, this is why one thing where Russia is different than, say, like Europe. Foreigners don't get anything. Like, it's not like in Germany where someone comes and they're like, I am from the Congo. Please give me more money than the average German makes, and I will be walking around in the street with money. It's not like that. Like, that's not how this place works. It's the opposite. So.
Once you become an actual citizen, though, that could work that way.
Maybe. I'm not sure, because the kids weren't born here, but they became citizens. See, that I don't know. I really don't know. If you became a citizen and had more children, it would count for sure 100%. But I'm not so sure about children you bring into the country. It's definitely helpful. It's definitely helpful to have a large chunk of a mortgage just vanish, because as you may know, maybe you don't know, I don't know what people know. When you take out like a large mortgage or loan from a bank, if you make, double payments, or you pay on like the principal part, it really makes a huge difference. You save a ton of money, like a crazy amount of money, if you make advanced payments. And so it's kind of like a giant advanced payment. But it also means that you ain't getting rid of that apartment or house or whatever you buy. You ain't getting rid of it until the kids are both legal adults and they can sign off on get rid of it. So you better like it. Yeah.
Right. Well, I just had one more thing to
Sure.
mention. And you may already know because I told you, but we have officially arrived in Moscow.
Yes. Congratulations. The war begins. You've crossed the Rubicon.
Well, we consider it, we crossed the threshold.
Mm-hmm.
New aircraft for us.
So, how was going through customs and all that? Did the border guards harass you? What's going on?
It did not. It was super simple for us. We got everything that and more that we were supposed to bring. We were able to bring everything that we wanted.
Oh,
Cost
good.
us an extra. I mean, okay, but we brought extra, almost $1,000 worth of luggage.
Yeah.
And which is not bad considering we have to bring our machine with us so we can start a business at some point.
Yeah.
And we got through customs. Nobody asked us about what? Nobody asked us about what we were claiming. They never interviewed us. They just held us for a few minutes while they looked over our passports and did some looking, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. They had our passport on hold for about 45 minutes, maybe an hour at most.
Yeah.
Then they just didn't talk to us. They just said, "Okay, you go."
All right. Okay. Well, that was easy because actually, recently someone was sharing a real horror story that they had on the channel in the chat, and I only found out recently through. So I actually have unbanned this person, but I don't think they're ever coming back. But they actually were telling more or less the truth, but they refused to prove it to me. So it was a pretty crazy horror story about getting really harassed by like immigration authorities and the police. But they didn't mention certain key factors about this whole thing. And they also made some pretty wild claims that a third party was able to sort of prove were kind of true. But I'll tell you this thing. Don't try to live in the Caucasus Mountains. It might be pretty, but boy, it is very much a you ain't from around here, boy, kind of attitude. Don't try to live there. I don't think I've ever heard one positive story from anyone. Of course, when you get citizenship, they can't stop you, but the Caucasus Mountains can be wild. I've heard some crazy stuff, so I don't know. But you really, if you're going to live there, you better speak Russian really damn good and be a citizen. I'll put it that way. Otherwise, you might want to stay in the more like central parts of Russia. So, yeah. But so so that person, they kind of went to maybe not the right region of Russia to live in, although it really shouldn't matter, but it does. And they had some documents that they thought would have a lot more weight than didn't. But anyways, got anything else for us about your new life, new adventures? I don't know, did you rent an apartment or something? What are you doing? How are you surviving?
Well, we're going to be immediately looking for where we can settle. So that's just about it. We're going to look around a little bit.
All right. Well, then hopefully I'll catch you in time because the American Village website will have some interesting options that you haven't even heard of before. So when it comes out.
Please.
All right.
Quickly, how soon? I missed that part. When are you putting that up?
I'll get the mock-up of the site on Sunday. It should probably take. The problem is then I have to go to St. Petersburg to film stuff, so I won't really be able to. excuse me. Get much info on the site. But when I get back, I mean, it's just kind of I'm sort of plugging up the text and the graphics and all that because a lot of it's already done. We found a few nice options for people to pick from what they want. I guess it might be like 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. It should be done before New Year's. Because it's just a matter. Mm-hmm.
Can it be possible for us to just get in contact with you maybe tomorrow or the next day?
Yes, tomorrow I will be doing what? I'm pretty sure I think I have to take my kid to a soccer game, which is something I should probably look into at 2:30 a.m. But hey, I live the rock and roll lifestyle. I don't check my schedule to the absolute last minute, apparently. If I take my kid to a soccer game, that's kind of good because I'm just going to be standing there in the cold with nothing to do than look. So we could talk then. If I don't do anything at all and I'll be at home, I can also talk then. So it's probably going to be a good day tomorrow, yeah. But the day after tomorrow and everything beyond that is going to be awful. So tomorrow or never, baby.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Well, then, anyways, guys, I guess I'm going to bail. No one else wants to talk. There's nothing, but there is a very nice picture. Someone put a picture of birria tacos would be nice. I went to a fancy, allegedly Mexican place very near the Goom store, department store, and this thing was, I think, a burrito. It looks very crunchy, and it also kind of looks very much like shawarma. And are those pickles and spinach? What is going on? What is going on in a world of burritos with pickles and spinach? Anyways, guys, I'm out of here. I'm now... That slightly disgusted me.